So a couple of years ago, I did a video on JavaScript classes. What I want to do today is update that video, talk about some of the new things that have been added to JavaScript classes, as well as show a practical application of a class being used as part of code for a simple website. So what I'm doing here is I'm making a call to the Star Wars API. I'm fetching a list of all the movies that they've got in there. Now, it's only the first 6 movies, but that's fine. It's just a small data set that I'm using. So we're bringing back here, you can see there's titles for the movies are coming back. What I want to put here is the year that it was released. So I'm going to put that here. Now the results that are coming back, right here, you can see there's an array of objects. And inside of each one of these, we have title, New Hope. So we're putting that out. There's a director. There's an episode ID. I'm using that in the attributes for the divs that are holding these bits of information. I have a release date. What I want to do is I want to take that date and extract the year portion of it and make it a property or a method that I can call to get just the year. Without having to write that in my code that's building the HTML, I want to have that as part of the class. So the data right here is going to be built up of movie objects. We're going to build a movie class. And for random character, what I'm going to do is I'm going to randomly select one of the values here from the characters array. The title for the page, I'm going to do a count to say how many we have here. Now there is a count property that comes back, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it dynamic. I'm going to make it part of the class. So as it builds these class objects, it's going to keep track of how many there are. We're going to use that to talk about static properties versus instant properties. Okay, jumping in, we can see in the HTML, there's not much there. There's the title, which we're going to replace. Inside the main, this is where we're putting all the movie data. The script to begin with, there's a global array called the movies. That's where we're going to place all this data. Now, right now, what we're doing is we're taking the results that are coming back from the API call. So data.results, we're taking that array and putting it in. So it's saved globally, so we can use it when we call build list. Build list is going to use the map method to loop through this thing, building up an HTML string for each one of them, joining them all together, and setting that as the inner HTML of the main element. Now, what I have here, the episode ID, title, director, and URL, those are all things that are built into the original data. So this year, that's something new. The random character, that's something new. Data ref, we're going to get an ID. We're going to create an ID and put it inside of here. All right, so up here at the top of my page, I am importing my movie class, and that's this JavaScript file over here. What we're going to do is we're going to take that object, we're going to instantiate that class, and use it right here. I'm just going to change this. Instead of setting movies equal to be the results coming back in the API call, I'm going to loop through data.results, and I'm going to create an array of these movie objects. So new movie. When you call a class, use new to instantiate it the same way you would with a constructor function. If it was just a regular function, you can call new and the name of the function. We're doing the same thing with the class here. And I'm going to pass in the film object. So each one of those movies back here in the browser, that's each of these objects here inside of the results array. Each of these objects, I'm going to pass those in to the constructor for our class. Okay, so we've got the code. We've just switched. We commented out this one line, replaced it with this one line. Nothing else has changed in this file. So I'm going to save it. And right now, it does the same thing. So it's the exact same result. Let's take a look at the class. We have the class keyword creates this class object. So we're building an object of type movie. Inside of a class in JavaScript, there is one function name that you can add called Constructor. This is the constructor. This is the function that builds your object. We don't have to write the return keyword here anywhere. it is going to automatically return the movie object that it is building. Now, I threw a little bit of stuff in here just to have something at the very start. I'm checking to make sure that the film object that's passed in has all of these fields: title, URL, director, release date, episode ID, and characters. If those all exist, we continue. If not, I'm going to throw an error. So if there was something that was missing, we would see an error showing up every time we called new movie right here. So this new movie is calling this constructor function. Once we get past the constructor, I am going to just copy over title, URL, director, episode ID, and characters. And you can see I've prefixed all of them with the keyword this. This means it's going to be a property of the object being returned. So over here, when we call new movie, the object that comes back, that's what's being placed into the array, the movies. That is a movie object. It is an object of type movie. Now, another way of creating one of these instance properties inside of the class is we can just declare it up here. So we're allowed to declare instance variables up here. Let's create one called ref. And I'm going to create another one called date. Now, I don't have to give it any value. I can just declare it. But this is like declaring variables inside of this object. By doing these two things right here, what I have actually done is I have created this.ref, this.date. These two properties are now part of my object. I have access to those things over here. When I loop through the movies, so down here, as I'm looping, I now have access to these things. Ref and date now exist. I could come in here and insert m, that's my variable that I'm using to loop through each of these movies, .ref. Now, all of them right now are going to be an empty string. But if I come in here, let's just put X inside just to have something there. This .ref is part of my object. Back in here, we go to the elements and we look inside. You can see data ref equals X. So we are accessing this .ref for every one of those movies. All right, now, that's not going to be of much value to us. We're going to come back, though, to that one, and we're going to update it. Date, this is where I'm going to take the release date that's coming in the data, and I'm going to actually turn it into a date object. So down here, we'll say this.date equals new date, and we'll pass in film.releaseDate. Now I have a date object that I can use. So over here, if I want to fill this in with a date object, well, I could write the date object here. I get the timestamp, but I want to have the year portion of it. So one way of doing it is inside of our class, I could do something like this. I could say this.year equals this.date get full year, like that. So now it's just an instance property like everything else. I don't want to do that though. I want to show an instance method. So if I want to add a method that is going to take the date object that we just created here and extract the year portion of it, we can right here. I'm still inside the class, this yellow line. So we're inside the class still. Coming after the constructor, we're going to say movie, we're going to say year, or rather, instead of just year, because that looks like a property, I'm going to create a method called getYear. So this.getYear would be what I'm doing. So over here, it would be m.getYear to call this method. And what is it going to do? It's going to return this.date.getFullYear. Just like that. So same thing that we did right here, but now it's being returned from a method. So getYear If I come back in here, we can replace this. Get year. So we're using that method that exists on the movie object. So I don't have to write the syntax here to turn the value of that string into a date object like we're doing right here. I don't have to add this line of code as well as call and get full year inside my HTML. I'm just using that direct method that exists now on every instance of the movie class. And there we have it. So there's the years being displayed, returned by that getYear method. Okay, now let's do another instance method. Now again, instance methods belong to each and every one of the objects that we create with the class. So we're going to get that random character one. We're going to go back into here. So we're going to replace this with a random string, one of the random characters. So get random char, we'll call it. And inside of here, we're going to return something from this.characters. And I need to know some random number, some index number, because this is an array. So I want to randomly select something there. We'll say index equals math.floor, math.random times, and then I need to know how many characters there are. So just the length of the characters array. There we go. Okay, so this will randomly give me one of those, and now I can call this method over here instead of doing that. So m is our variable right here. So as we're looping through with map, m.getRandomChar. There we go. Jump to here. Not a function. Yes, of course, we didn't save our file. There we go. So this is now saved as an instance method. There we go. And we're getting random strings coming back for every one of them. So this is randomly selected out of this array. If we look in the first one for A New Hope, if we look at characters, we're getting people 7. So it's this one right here. We randomly selected that one. Okay, great. So we have that working. That's instance properties, instance methods. That leads us to now static methods and properties. Static means that instead of it being on this object, this M object, the thing that we put into the array, every time you call new movie, you get an instance. Well, a static method or property is one that exists on the movie object itself, on the class. So right up here at the top, this thing, movie, on that we have the potential to add properties or methods. To do it, we use the keyword static. So I'm going to create one called count, and I'm going to set it equal to 0 to begin with. Inside of here, we're going to say movie.count, and we're going to increment it. So here, we'll start this. Yeah, we'll start it at 0, and then we'll increment it each time we go through. So it'll be the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 if we use it after we've incremented it. We could take that and use it as an ID or as some sort of reference number. We had right here, ref is X. We could use it inside of here. We could say this.ref equals math.random. To string 16. I'll make it a hexadecimal, and we'll extract it so we don't get the period that comes up in the random number. It's 0 point something. We're going to convert it to just being, let's say 8 hexadecimal characters. And we could multiply it by count if we wanted. Something like that. So we're generating these random reference numbers, which we can then use over here. m.ref, it's this value right here. If we look at the elements, there we go. There's our data reference numbers. So those are the numbers that we were randomly generating, and we were using count as part of that. Now we don't have to use count as part of it, but we have static property now, count, and this is incrementing each time we go through to being a different number. We could save that number and use it in an instance variable as we went through counting. But what I want to do is I'm going to create a static method as well. And we'll call this one get total movies. So static, meaning it belongs to the movie object. It's not shared by all the instances. It only exists on the movie object. So there's one call to this, and it's going to return movie.count. So this method, if you want to get the total number, this is the one that we're going to call. Now, this number does exist already here. There's a count 6, but just as a demonstration of what we could do with the method. So we call this method when we want to get that total number, and I'm going to use it in my title here. So you can see movie.getTotalMovies. This is going to get us the value of count after we've already looped through, because we looped right up here where we were creating the instances of movies. So this looped 6 times, so our total movies got incremented to 6. And that is what's showing up here. This 6 is coming from that method, that static method that belongs to the movie. Now, sometimes you want to have properties like the reference number, but you don't want to necessarily have people accessing this.ref. You want them to access another property. So let's say that we were going to create a property called ID. I'm going to create a getter and a setter for a property called ID. Now, this looks like a method, but it's actually this.id, same as these things, this.episode ID, character date. There's a property called ID, and you would access it in the code on the other page like this, m.id. And here, setting it means you're not just getting the value, here you're setting the value, so you would pass some new value in, and we would say this.id equals val. Or in the code on the other page, m.id equals some new value. So this is the code that would be over on this page. If I wanted to allow somebody to change it, if I only made this method, if I only made the getter, we can say return this.ref. So whatever the value of this is how you get it now. Back in this page, instead of ref, ID, that is the value that I want. It's going to be the exact same as it was before. If we look inside of here, oh, undefined. What did I miss? So we've got this.ref. No, I just didn't save, I think. I think that's all the problem was. Yeah, there we go. So data ref is the attribute in the HTML, but this is movie.id or m.id right here. This is how we're accessing it now, is through a property called ID. So we're exposing ID as the property we want people to use. Now, if I don't want somebody to be able to change the ID, I can either omit this, or by omitting this, it silently fails. We can actually do something a little bit more useful. We can write an error message. We could throw an error. Return false. You know, all these things scream, no, 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 you're not supposed to do anything with this. You're not supposed to change this. So in your documentation, you would say ID is the property that you want people to use. You don't even mention this.ref. Internally, we're using this.ref. Now, that may seem like a bit counterintuitive, creating an extra property to expose something. But what we can do is when we get is we can format things. So I could do to uppercase, just as an example. Here, I could do validation. So whatever value you're passing in, I make sure it's the correct data type. I make sure that it's the right length, if it's a string, or whatever it is you want to do to validate it. This gives you the opportunity to validate and make sure there's not bad data going into your properties. Now we still have this.ref. It still exists as something that can be seen from the code over here in the other file that imported the movie class. If I want to hide that, now this is another one of the new things that have been added to classes in JavaScript, and that is private variables. If I come up here to the top and I say $ref or $date, these are now private. I can do it to instance variables. I can also do it to static variables. This one is now private as well. That means they can only be used inside of the class itself. They cannot be used over here. It's like they don't exist. They're undefined over here. Now, if you do put the pound signs, you have to make sure that you change all of them. So anywhere I've got count or date or ref, I have to put the pound sign in front of it. So here's ref, here's count, here's date, down here, ref. Instead of get year, we had date. Characters. That could be another one that we do. So characters, we're giving a random character back with this. Maybe I don't want to expose the entire characters array. I want this to be private as well. So I come up here to the top and I'll say, yeah, characters. That is a private value as well. So characters is private. Down here, we'll say that it's private. We'll say that it's private. Now, nobody can access the entire array. They can only access the one that I'm returning through this method. And for the ID, ref is now private. Nobody can access ref. They can't come over here and do m.ref. If they do, that's going to fail. I'm going to save my changes here. If they do m.ref, we open this up and look at it, undefined. It's like it doesn't exist. And you might be thinking, oh, okay, well, it's just because I forgot the pound sign. Well, you put the pound sign in there in front of ref, you're going to get JavaScript errors now saying, no, you're only allowed to do the pound sign syntax inside of a class. So we have really just hidden this whole thing. And you have to go through m.id. You have to go through the ID property. We can call the method getRandomChar to get that random character, but I cannot access the characters array. GetYear I can do, but I can't access the date property. It exists, it's a date object, and it has all that information inside of it, but we can't get to it from here. It's protected. And that's what private gives us. Private also means, down here, if I was to extend this, let's say I create a brand new class, class documentary. So here's a brand new class, and we've got constructor down here as well. When you extend something, you have to call the superclass, and we would have to be passing in a film object, something with all those film properties. So the private things that we created up above, you can't use them in here either. They can only be used inside of this class where they were declared. So inside of movie, where they're declared, this is the only place that they can be touched or changed or used or even seen. Can't do it in subclasses, and we definitely can't do it in files that are instantiating these class objects like movie. All right, so I hope that helps clear up any confusion that you have around classes. I hope that helps you start to integrate them or integrate that syntax into what you're building. A copy of this code is linked to as a code gist down inside the description. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I answer as many as I have time for. And as always, thanks for watching.